Welcome to episode 3 of Navigating Ableton. The intent of this video is to understand where everything is at in your DAW so that you can feel a lot more familiar with it. Today's course overview will be going over the 2 types of views within Ableton, all of the panels and browsers, and then the 2 types of tracks and how to create groups. Okay, this first part is very simple. When you first open up Ableton, it's going to look like this. This is called your session view, and when you press the tab key, it brings you to your arrangement queue. So swapping with the tab key between session and arrangement is how you do that. I should have mentioned that in the previous video. My apologies, I just didn't feel like recording it. But yes, this is how you switch between these 2 views, the tab key. Okay, this next part is not so fast. We have quite a bit to go over, but don't stress. You'll pick this up as you go, and we're going to try and break it down very simple from left to right, top to bottom. So we have approximately 4 sections within this view. On the left side, we have our sidebar and our browser. That's 1. And this big middle section gray area, this is our arrangement. This is 2. On the far right side, we have all our tracks here. This is like our track list, number 3. And then we have this bottom pane known as like the device or channel view. What I'm going to start calling the post-processing window unconventionally, and we'll get into that later, but just whenever I reference post-processing window or post-processing chain, I'm talking about this thing down here. So let's go ahead and start breaking it down. Like I said, on the left side, this is our browser side view. As you can see, it's broken up into 3 sections: collections, library, and places. So we'll start with collections. This is easy. It's just a way of color coding things. So for instance, if I right-click an effect, I can make it green, and that just puts it in my favorites folder. So all of my favorite audio effects are labeled green, and this is just a way of increasing efficiency. So if I need the amp, I just click on my favorites here, click and drag amp onto a track, and boom, it's down here. Very simple. Moving on, the library section is just where all of your stuff is within Ableton and all of the stock Ableton stuff. So when you click all, literally everything you own is in this all folder. Don't go through here. It's just a mess. Moving on, your stock Ableton drums are all in here. Your stock Ableton sounds are all in here. The stock Ableton instruments, pretty self-explanatory. Don't worry about all of this stuff. I really haven't been using any of these tunings, grooves, or samples. But the thing that you do need to know out of all of this is plugins. Plugins is just a fancy way or technical way of saying third-party application. So anything that you bought from Plugin Boutique or the synthesizer that you rented from Splice, the Serum synthesizer, will all be found in here. Moving on. The last section within your sidebar browser is places. These are just custom built folders. You can just make a folder and keep all of your own personal collections and sounds in here. And you can also put subfolders within folders and subfolders within those subfolders. And it's just a way of creating your own library here within places. It's very nice. Moving on. Number 2, this is our arrangement view, and this is where we actually start to make music and play with Legos is what I call. So if I click and drag a audio file into here, the infamous spooky trill meme that I love hiding in my music. Gotta love it. Yeah, this is where we can actually start to manipulate audio and start arranging stuff. Pretty self-explanatory. The right side, I'm gonna go ahead and turn myself off and disappear. The right side is our track list, and this is where we can start to make tracks and more tracks. These are audio tracks, these are MIDI tracks. Pretty self-explanatory. And each track holds sounds, like before. And what else I want to share with you? I'm not going to get into too much of all the parameters here, but I'll just quickly show you. We can adjust the volume of a track here by clicking and dragging this volume slider. We can turn the track on and off by clicking the number of the track. So right now it's off, right now it's on. We can solo the track. So if we only want to listen to the audio in this track, we just solo it to do that. And then if you wish to record, you press this little circle button, and now this is called arming the track. It's called arming the track. So if I click the record button up here, only this track is recording, as you can see. So if my mic was externalized, plugged into this, it would be recording my audio, but I'm recording to you, so it's not doing that. Turn myself back on real quick so you can see my beautiful face. Moving on, the last pane, known as the post-processing chain in this boot camp, this is where we put audio effects. So if I go ahead and put this spooky trill meme back onto this audio track here, and I go to my favorites folder that are tagged green, and I just click and drag amp onto that track, boom, it's there. And I can just distort the hell out of this like so. Gotta love it. I'll just quickly show you one thing. So when you are selected on a track with a sound, you can just double click the effect and it will load it in. That is one way of doing it. You can click and drag the effect onto the audio file on that track and it will load it in. Or you can click and drag it all the way down into the window down here and it will load it in. So just so you know. A couple of other small things I'll mention, which we'll get into later, is these tracks down here. These are called return tracks. Don't stress about those right now. We'll get into that later. And then this last one here at the bottom called main, this is your master chain. So all the sounds that are in this arrangement view, this is the final destination for this, or for your music upon export. At the top of Ableton here, we have a bunch of controls, but not fluent in all of them, again, because I'm not an expert, but the most important one here on the top left is your BPM control. So stock Ableton, default Ableton sets at 120. If we double click this, we can type in a number, put in 140 for 140 beats per minute. Most rhythm is like that. I'm not familiar with all these other time signatures and stuff. I believe this is like a metronome. I don't really use that. We have a play button up here. We have a stop button and then the record button I went over. I'm not familiar with all of this stuff. I don't really use it. Probably not pertinent to you. I'm gonna go ahead and turn myself off real quick. We went over this in the previous video. This is your CPU meter, so it tells you how hard your computer is running. Right now it's at 3-4%. It's barely anything. We can turn our audio engine off, and remember, we can configure audio from here. A couple of other things is these buttons. I'm not gonna get into those yet. I think that's a later video, so yeah. Just remember, from left to right, top to bottom, you got your sidebar. Turn myself on. We got your sidebar browser view. This is where you can find all of your sounds and categorize all of your sounds. We have our arrangement view here where you actually start playing with Legos and manipulating the audio and dragging it around. Your right side is your device and track list. This is where you can create new tracks for new instruments and new sounds. And then the bottom pane here is your post-processing chain where we actually put the effects on and can start manipulating audio. So if that was too much, watch it again. All right, the last part is how to actually create tracks. And there's multiple ways to do this. If we right click into this gray area, we can insert audio track. That inserts an audio track. If we right click in the gray area, we can insert a MIDI track. That inserts a MIDI track. There are shortcuts to this as well. If I do Command T, that creates audio tracks. If I do Shift Command T, this creates MIDI tracks. And that is how you create tracks. Now, we can also group tracks. So if I create 3 audio tracks and I click on one and I hold Shift and I click the last one, it highlights all of them. And I can right click and do group tracks. And now it's in a group. And if I click this little button here, I can collapse all of them together. Cool. There's also another way of doing this is if I highlight all 3 of those tracks again and I do Command G, shortcut to group it again. So that is how you create audio tracks, MIDI tracks, and groups. Very important to know, and you're going to be doing that quite a bit. So I highly recommend getting used to the keyboard shortcuts. Hey, so I'm in my video editing program. Apologize for the abrupt jump cut, but obviously missing file here. And this is supposed to be the course overview. So yeah, let's just go ahead and do the course overview. Thanks, Final Cut. So in today's lesson, we went over the 2 views in Ableton, that being the arrangement and session view. You enable on and off with the tab key. There's also an icon on the very top right, which I'll explain later in the series, that you can click if you can find it. Good on you, but that's just another way. And then we went over all of the panels in Ableton from left to right. You got your browser, the arrangement thing in the center, and then you have like the group headers on the right where your tracks go, and then the bottom we're going to start calling the post-processing lane, like where all your effects go. And then the last thing we went over is how to create individual tracks and groups, MIDI tracks and audio tracks. It's actually really funny that I'm recording this course overview right now for one of the almost the last videos of the bootcamp series, because today I finished all of the recording for the Schoolhouse series that follows after this. So I think it's just funny when I'm doing final touches that having to do this little overview from the beginning of the course. So yeah, I guess full circle. I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching.